to our community. It is co-sponsored by the Visalia Times Delta, the Valley Voice, and First Presbyterian Church, which owns this building. And we are always very grateful for the use of this space on the second Tuesday of the month for this forum. Our subject tonight is housing, keeping a roof over our heads, something that is of personal interest to everyone, but also to a community. The community doesn't thrive or manage itself without a healthy supply of housing for its residents. So, we're going to undertake a discussion tonight on housing in Visalia. Is Visalia meeting the need? Now, I have some mobility issues, so for starters, I'm going to take a seat while I introduce our panel, okay? And then I'm going to go in the back. We have a great panel of a really strong panel, to tell you the truth. We don't deserve all these guys tonight. Thank you all very much for coming out tonight. John Hess of the Tulare County Housing Authority, Tom Collishaw of Self-Help Enterprises, Paul Bernal of the City of Visalia, and Brian Gilbert of Brian Gilbert Realty, Inc.? Well, yeah, Realty.
That's my DBA. Also,
Inc.? Okay.
My license is held with the Equity Group.
All right. Terrific. Let me start out by a real open-ended question. What is our need for housing in Visalia? What's the most pressing need, for instance? Tom?
Yeah, you could start with me. Well, we are not adequately serving people when it comes to their income and their ability to afford housing in the community. At Self-Help Enterprises, we focus on people below 80% of area median income. And just to demythologize that number, right now, this year in Tulare County, 80% of area median income is $75,100 for a family of four. We serve people at or below that. And just to talk about how out of reach housing is for that group of people, even at that top level that we serve, that person could afford, by normal metrics, at 30% of their income, a full housing cost of $1,877 a month. And if you think about home ownership, what you have to take off that is probably $450 to $500 in taxes and insurance. So they will only have left about $1,300 a month. And that's at the top end. So we are not adequately serving anybody at or below that level, except with some significantly subsidized housing products that we and others, Housing Authority amongst others, are able to produce because the affordability is not there. To give you some sense of that, we are about to open a project in Northeast Visalia, just north of the Target, called Rancho Colegio. And there is a market rate rental project that has already opened just adjacent to the south. The rents there are, for a 2-bedroom unit, $1,900 a month. $1,995 a month, I take that back. For their 1-bedroom units, it's $1,795. That's what's advertised on their website. So you do the math. We are not serving people at the incomes and at what they're capable of buying or renting.
Is that pretty typical, that level? $2,000 a month? Rents in Visalia? That's what I've sort of heard is
That's
Is it-
probably about right.
Kind of a median mark, Paul, 2,000?
That sounds about on average based on some of the other market rate apartment developments that have developed in Visalia over the last several years. Just looking at some of their data that they've been providing. So
Is that measuring stick of you should be spending about 30% of your income on your housing? Is that still hold true to form? Tom, you're nodding your head, so
Yes, I mean, that's somewhat of an arbitrary figure, certainly, and the lower, in our view, the lower income that you are, that's getting to be too high. You should be closer to 25%. But generally, most of the subsidy programs are based on 30% all-in housing costs compared to your gross income.
your gross income. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, and it goes a little lower the less income you have, huh? Then things get tight.
But I would say that
Yeah.
in a slightly higher income bracket, you're looking at closer to 40 or 50%. People are struggling with 50% of their income to buy and live in a house as opposed to renting. So it's going to be the same for renters. And rents have come down a little bit as opposed to an apartment complex. If you're renting a residential home, 3 bedrooms, somewhere depending on the age, anywhere between 1,800 and 2,200, and a 4-bedroom, 2,200, 2,400. I've seen some as high as 2,900, 2,600, but it's expensive to rent, expensive to own, and companies like Self-Help are really one of the only avenues we have to help low income people to be able to afford a house.
So we really need more in that area, huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The affordability rate in the state of California is only 30%. It's a little bit higher here in Tulare County, but it used to be 60%, and now it's falling, and it's not the future is not looking bright unless we do something about it.
Brian, you mean 60% are homeowners? Is that what you're referring to?
60% affordability back 5 years
I
ago,
see. Okay.
and now it's significantly less.
John,
Yeah,
you had something
and that's really, I think-
you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, no, the idea that I think we're all saying is that across the spectrum, there's needs, and across the spectrum, there's a housing gap and a housing deficit across from low income to moderate income, and even sort of a little bit higher end homes as well. Across from top to bottom, there's really just a deficit in available units all over the place.
What's the affordability index? Can you explain that?
It's the number of people who make enough money in order to pay a mortgage.
It's only 30%.
Statewide is 30%. Ours here, we're a little bit higher. But when you get into urban areas, San Francisco, Sacramento, Los Angeles, coastal cities, significantly fewer people are able to buy houses. We are still the most affordable area in the state of California, and fortunately enough for us, we are still growing, but the rest of the state is pretty stagnant.
Our affordability index is a little bit more manageable because our housing costs are lower.
Correct.
Couldn't be because our income
of
is
scale.
higher. So yeah, okay, good. John, I'm curious. Tulare County Housing Authority is doing that project at the corner of Demery and Goshen.
Yes, Houston, yeah.
Houston, Goshen, between
Yeah.
Goshen and Houston, Demery to the west of that, right? Could you tell us a little bit about that? And I have a personal interest because I live near there.
Sure,
I've
sure, a
watched
lot
it
of
go
people do.
for about the last 3 years, I think.
So yes, Paul, absolutely. It's a 222 unit affordable housing, so it's going to have multiple different types of units, obviously different, 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, and kind of like Tom was saying, there's different affordability categories for the income of the various different tenants. We're in the process right now of actually signing tenants up, so if there's anybody that you know of or anybody's interested, please come by the office or give a call, because we're always looking for new tenants. They are subsidized, so the units are going to be below market, and kind of the price point Tom was saying, they're basically at that same price point, anywhere between $1,400 to $2,100, depending on the size of the unit and the income eligibility of the prospective tenants. We're very proud of it. It's going to look good. We know it's in a needed part of town. That's going to be a tight. We're not helping the traffic. I know in that part of Visalia by any means.
Yeah, I'm going to find a new route to go downtown for sure. But Yeah, it does. It does look good, and that is welcome. What are the kinds of projects do we have going on right now that are hold promise for new housing of any kind? Paul?
So, yeah, thank you for that question. There are several projects that have been entitled, and that's a fancy word for saying approved, at the Planning Commission level, where if most of those projects were to come online, you're looking at an excess of over close to 2,000 units that could be developed. That's both single-family housing, which is a majority of it, but in addition to the development we just talked about at Houston and Demery, that the same applicant has two more of those projects kind of throughout the community that they're looking to obtain tax credit to help develop those affordable units as well. So just in general, there are several projects out there. Tom mentioned the project that I think grand opening is occurring next month, if I'm not mistaken. So you're seeing a wide range. So we've had projects that have been deemed affordable because they have those clauses that they're setting rental income limits based on what you make. But then there are also other projects that are market rate as well. Why they're not being developed at this current time, I couldn't really speak to that. But from the city's perspective, we've been able to process those through in a timely manner, get them approved, so that when they're ready to move to development and actually begin construction, we're ready to accommodate any needs that they need as they get through that process.
So am I to understand that there are projects that have been approved, sort of ready to go, but they have not breaking ground?
That is correct.
Reason for that? Not breaking ground? Don't have anybody wants.
I know in two projects in their particular case, they're affordable, so they're looking at applying for tax credits. So they're getting in their applications for this round, and if they're successful in obtaining that, then the assumption would be they would move forward with building permit submittal so that they can begin construction.
I hate to digress, but here we go. As long as we're on the subject, what's the atmosphere? What's the climate right now for that kind of financing, Paul? Public financing or other projects?
We've got a big problem, and we need to pass a bond, a statewide housing bond, because most of the money that came out of the last housing bond from 18 or 19, is pretty much gone at the state, and it's all hyper competitive. The tax credit picture is actually a little better because the 4% credits, which is the lesser of the credits in terms of how much investment you can amass to build your project, is actually going to double in size, but it's at a time when the subsidies at the state are going to be pretty thin unless we pass a bond in the next, this November.
So really quickly, it's just a little bit of education if folks are not necessarily familiar with low-income housing tax credits. It's a national it's perhaps the single most important construction financing for low-income housing across the United States. And the basic gist of it is private sector investment wouldn't otherwise want to invest their dollars in the construction of performing financial assets like low-income housing, because there isn't just the margin for profit as you would have on a for market or at market rates apartment complex. And so what the government does, in this case the state of California does, they actually put in the budget money for private investors to get tax credits off of their tax liability if they invest in these pools that then go to housing developers such as Self-Help and housing authorities throughout the state. It costs the state money to do that, and they have to sell bonds and do other sort of financial borrowing in order to capitalize that money. And it's, as Tom was saying, very, very competitive, but it also is the single most generating engine we have when it comes to affordable housing units or affordable apartment units throughout the state of California, by far.
The 4% aspect of the program will double the availability because of something, the big, beautiful, ugly bill.
HR1.
HR1.
HR1,
Sorry. That actually freed up a number of additional tax credits.
there's two categories, 4% and 9%, and depending on the nature of your project, how it pencils out, and again, it is very complex, and Tom can talk about it in greater detail than I could ever, but it is very, very competitive and complex to go for either of those, and there's always somebody out there looking for those monies. And so when Paul mentions that there's folks out there who bought property or in the process of developing it and they're waiting for that, that's really one of the major hangups.
Are these properties rent controlled
Yes, they are,
Yes.
for 55 years.
for 55 years?
That's probably not a real selling point for an investor, is it? Can be harder to get your money back if it's rent controlled?
What I was going to say in regard to that is the last election cycle, we shot down rent control for California. But just last
Yeah.
week, I'm on the state board for realtors. I'm a director for the state.
We knew those were the reasons we wanted you here. Go ahead.
Just last week, 2 weeks ago, somebody else came up with a new bill, rent control for the whole state of California, which for low-income housing, it makes sense. But for anybody who wants to make a profit in the long run,
Yeah.
rent control is really bad for builders because you end up losing money.
Yeah.
So they just won't build, so you won't have housing.
Yeah.
If I could ask a question, in terms of how long does it take after you've got an approval from the planning commission, low income versus just somebody out regular development? How long does it take?
So I'm trying to make sure I understand the question. So are you asking what's the timing from an approval to you actually see vertical construction?
You see somebody able to move in.
Oh, that's a great question.
Now that we started asking questions here, excuse me, sir. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. I really don't. I don't mean to be rude, although I often am. Yes, if you use the microphone, it helps us because this is being recorded. So those of you who have a question, wait until the microphone gets to you to ask it so we can hear it. Go ahead. Thank you.
So it depends. There are times, where you may have a market rate development, and from time that a permit is issued to you see vertical construction, depending on weather, there are a lot of factors that go into that. Could be up to about a year maybe as they prep the ground, move in all the utility infrastructure to get the vertical construction going. So, like I said, it varies from project to project. There is no exact science to when actually that occurs.
I was more curious about just if it's low income, does it take a lot longer, or is it similar, or is it just more complex?
I would say, the construction aspect of it is about 18 months. What does often take time is a series of competitions for funding and awards of things like low-income housing tax credits. That's what tends to take the most time. We get them shovel-ready to be competitive for those, but that can take 2 years pretty easily. So I'd say the average for us is about 4 years from inception to people moving in.
Every project has what's called a financing stack, and before you submit to the state agency that oversees the low-income housing tax credits, you have to have a whole layer of financing and site control and a variety of different things, and that is very bureaucratic and very time-consuming, but you don't even see anything happening on the ground for 2 or 3 years behind the scenes. But a lot of staff energy and a lot of money is being spent by agencies such as ours and by partners to make it even get to there, and not knowing if you're going to get that project, that's a risk, and that's a risk that we have to bake into all the other projects, overhead and administrative costs, because we have to realize there's other projects that may never make it, or they may make it in another cycle down the road.
At this point, does anybody else have any questions right away? I'll interrupt frequently to give you opportunity to ask them, but again, I would stress, please wait for the mic so we can hear you. And they can hear you on our live stream and on the recording. What are the things we have going on right now, building-wise, low income or otherwise?
Yeah, I'll just mention besides our Rancho Colegio, which is more deeply targeted. The Housing Authority does some great projects. We do great projects, but there are different targeting levels, and the Demery Houston one is higher income target, although all below 80%. And our Rancho Colegio rents are going to be as low as $528 a month, because we have targets to as low as 30% of area median income which is more like $46,000 a year, as opposed to that median income I talked about earlier. So different ranges, different departments. But we're also thrilled that we got our last piece of important funding to start. We're going to break ground soon on a senior project, great senior project. I know some of our friends at Visalia Senior Housing who are partners on that project, which are also just off Ferguson and Dinuba Boulevard. And it's a first phase of a great new senior facility, and we're going to break ground about the next 60 days or so. So we're getting toward the end
Number of units?
there. At full build out, we're expecting somewhere in the neighborhood of 160 to 200 units. The first phase is 80 units.
Okay.
I believe I have that right.
The housing
That's-
authority, oh, go ahead. We have about 4 projects that I'll talk about here. 2 of them are low-income housing tax credit applications, so they're not really up and going yet. But
Okay,
so it's, I
go
don't want
ahead.
to get people too excited. But 2 of them would be here in Visalia, Houston and Lovers Lane, and Lovers Lane in Caldwell. Both of them would be 300 units more or less, so that'd be 600 units there plus the 220 we just built. So we're pushing into 1,000 units in a few years there, which is pretty good volume. We're doing a very small project with the County of Tulare, the Health and Human Services Agency, just 22 units, but those are full subsidy units for very qualified individuals who have developmental disabilities as well as veterans. So there's only 22 units, but those are going to be very, very high need units. And then a small project of 42 units in Farmersville, and we're happy with that as well because Farmersville needs, even small numbers for them make a big difference.
Other stuff going on? I mean, so far this sounds really promising. I know you started out with kind of,
Well,
it's a bad profile, but
well, in addition to the projects that were just identified, we do have, what we're tending to see more in the area are subdivisions. So this is single-family home ownership at a smaller lot size. So they're trying to increase density and maximize, the number of lots that they can fit on a piece of property, but then also coming up with design measures to help accommodate what you're giving up in lot size so that you somewhat retain your habitable space at the levels that people have been accustomed to for single-family home ownership. That's a different trend because I think one thing we're trying to grapple with is I think the City Council's been very direct with ensuring that we continue to support projects that build neighborhoods. So just not looking at plopping houses down.
Put a house
but making
down
sure
somewhere.
There's connectivity, open space amenities, because if you're reducing your private yard space, what are we providing, or what are those projects providing in terms of open space amenities for the residents that will live there? So council's been very direct at ensuring that we get good, high-quality projects, regardless of whatever the income category is, but making sure that they're designed in a manner that they thrive once residents move into them.
well, that's good. That's the way to build a community. Plan it. Yeah.
Very true.
I'm glad you sort of moved in that direction because I did want to talk a little bit about single-family homes. What's our available stock like, and what are our costs at this time? And Paul or Brian, probably best ones to sort of hit that one.
I'll say a couple things. So I do not have the statistics handy, but the medium housing cost in Visalia is around $420, $425.
Okay.
Statewide, it's $800. So that shows you the availability, the housing availability cost differential between the haves and the have-nots, if you want to say that.
How about building a new house at this point, today, Brian? That same amount for
There are some.
425?
There's some in the area we call West Visalia, Granite Hills, and those where they started in the 360s. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-story, small lots, as you're saying, around 3,500 square foot lots. Brand new neighborhoods, nice amenities. I'm in there all the time, and you can pay as much as you want. Wildflower out off Robin and Walnut, they have $1 million houses out there, and then Andalusia right next door basically has houses between starting in the 450s and going up to around 800 if I'm in the neighborhood there, somewhere around there. But in my opinion, our issue statewide is that we have a housing shortage. I mean, if we need 90,000 new houses, our capability of building is only about 50,000. And it's like that nationwide. And, but here in Tulare County, I see a lot of new construction, and I know a lot of those builders have purchased land to build more new construction. And I'm not seeing a lot of, in resale market, I'm not seeing a lot of multiple counter offers, which means there's still a supply of houses for the time being, but that can change in an instant. Once May comes and the current Fed chairman is replaced, we might see an immediate dip if the bond market follows the Fed reduction in interest rates. So you might see a run on properties around May, June. So you heard it here first. If I'm wrong, remind me. But you heard it here first.
Yeah, thanks for that about the new Fed chairman. We,
Yeah, and that will change everything.
first I'd heard of that.
Yeah.
We got a question right here before we, although I do want to hear from Paul.
I guess to the city. You mentioned like 400 units out on Lover's Lane. What is the city doing to mitigate the traffic issues regarding the development of housing in Visalia?
So I want to make sure I understand the question. What are we doing to mitigate traffic with housing?
That's
So,
gonna,
Traffic with the housing developments that are happening. I hear a lot of people complaining
Well,
about the traffic.
go
What
ahead.
is done in
You-
anticipation
use-
of problems with traffic?
well, what's done
You
in
understand that his expertise is in housing and not in traffic, right?
well,
They kind of go together.
I know, they're related, but just so you know.
yeah, so I you know, city has a general plan, blueprint, if you will, that identifies how the city's gonna grow over the next 20 years. And part of that plan includes circulation. How are we gonna accommodate the growth that the city is growing? Now, with growth, you're gonna get an increase in traffic, especially in areas where growth maybe did not occur or has not seen new development occur. So the way the city anticipates it is we identify what our major roads are to ensure that the money that gets collected in impact fees gets funneled back into improving those roadways. Other things we look at trying to do is making sure we refer to it as super block connectivity. So making sure when neighborhoods are built, they extend local roadway networks into future areas that allow for traffic to circulate through a neighborhood, even just in terms of pedestrian connectivity. If you lived in the neighborhood, could you go visit the neighborhood next door without having to go out onto a major street? So we plan based on the needs of our roadways. We collect money, so when major roadways need signalization, we have the money to ensure that it gets done when the warrants are met to install signalization. It's there. I think what the perception is when new development comes, you're just not used to seeing the traffic that comes with it, but it's all accounted for. Our roads are designed to accommodate the traffic needs. I can tell you from the city's perspective on the transit front, the city is somewhat aggressive in trying to find out ways to get people out of their vehicles. You've heard of Visalia Connect, and those that haven't heard of it, it's essentially the city's version of Uber or Cart or Lyft. $5 takes you anywhere in the city limits. So again, it's just trying to figure out those multi-modes of transportation to help alleviate some of the traffic concerns.
Does that help, sir?
I just hear a lot of people complaining about traffic on Demery, Lover's Lane, so forth.
I will just speak to one thing, just to address the Demery, Goshen. We understand it's, a lot of traffic that goes through there. The city is looking and trying to work with the rail company because that does dictate. You cannot get at-grade crossings anymore. It's impossible. There are ways to do it, and the city's entertaining how you do some of those. There is a look and a study in trying to get an at-grade crossing at the Chenoweth at Goshen. Not saying that it's going to happen, but the city's actively looking at trying to, and that's not going to solve all the problems, but it should help alleviate some of them. At-grade crossing.
At grade.
At-grade, meaning there's
Mean going across the railroad tracks, being able to go across the railroad
no
tracks.
bridge, no under. It's you at grade. No.
Yep. Paul?
I know there's Reggie. I know there's some comments or some comments were made about, the state is probably half of at the housing need that it needs to be. here in Tulare County, our housing needs assessment is what number, and how close to that number are we? Because I do know that it seems like permits pulled doubled last year, and they're probably going to double again this year if they stay on pace. So it sounds like maybe we're going to make some headway, but what is our total need, and what do we have? What's the gap right now?
I don't have that answer. I'm hoping one of these guys does.
So, yeah, the state allocates our regional housing needs through the regional housing needs assessment. That gets allocated down to each of the local council governments. And that methodology and how they derive those numbers, that's all up for debate. But for the city of Visalia, we were assigned in excess of 10,000 units. And when I say units, it's in all income categories. Predominantly, most of those are the below the 80% threshold. I can tell you just from a permit standpoint, for single family over the last 3 years, in 2025, we issued 562 single family residential permits. In 24, that was 270, and then in 23, that was 335. But again, that single family, a majority of those are market rate, so they're not really, I wouldn't say most of them wouldn't qualify for some of those lower income categories. The flip side of that, though, is we do have multifamily developments that have been discussed that are deed restricted. Those units, once built, even though they're rentals, they do help with providing those numbers to the state to show what Visalia is doing in terms of trying to meet the needs of our area.
Just to elaborate just for a second,
Go ahead.
if I could. That 10,000 units for a 7-year period, correct? 8-year period. So it's not 10,000 in 1 year. And the thing I want to say about home ownership is that there is no affordable home ownership for anyone below median income going on in Visalia right now. Brian alluded to West Visalia, which is Goshen, and there's a number of us, including Self-Help Enterprises, building entry-level, single-family home ownership units, and there are some market rate folks doing the same thing. You can do that in Goshen. You can't do it in Visalia right now because of a number of costs that are going to be more than in Visalia than they are in the county.
So I'm on the Tulare County Housing Authority, but my day job is I work for the County of Tulare, and I worked for the county for over 20 years. Part of it was over at Resource Management Agency, which also includes the planning and development and the entity that oversees the regional housing needs assessment. But it's been many years since I was connected with that in any way, shape, or form, so I can't speak to it intelligently today. What I can say is sort of what Tom was saying, which is county growth, meaning unincorporated growth outside the city of Visalia, really is limited and concentrated on a variety of very real factors. The number one factor being infrastructure. Infrastructure for a house, that's going to be $180,000, $200,000, $220,000. For that developer to put in the infrastructure necessary to make that profitable, to hit the market and turn a profit for themselves is nearly impossible in the unincorporated community. The population of the unincorporated part of Tulare County has not grown since 1988. It is exactly the same as it was. It went up and then came right back down since 1988. At one point, 10 years before that, 1978, 60% of Tulare County residents lived in the unincorporated communities somewhere outside of a city. Now it's only 24%. The growth has really, and perhaps there's wisdom to that. There's reasons from a planning perspective as to why it's more cost effective and efficient to get people into cities, but the growth really has been concentrated within the cities over the last 30 or 40 years. Goshen's probably the one place, when I speak on behalf of the county, where we do have some aggressive developers and some developers that are really interested in getting that sort of, $180,000, $220,000, $240,000, $240,000 home to market. And that's not going to be doable for much longer. There's not going to be the infrastructure necessary or available to do that forever.
That help? Any other questions about what we've talked about so far? Okay. Could you handle this microphone to that lady there?
I was just wondering what, if Visalia has a special program for ADUs.
Great question. Yes, we do. City of Visalia, you can find them on the city's website under their planning Division homepage. Yeah, an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit. They're allowed to be built where single family or residential homes are allowed to be developed. So several years ago, the city.
Hold on. Might be more familiar to all as a mother-in-law unit. Okay,
Granny flat.
cottage, granny cottage. Yeah. Okay.
It's a second dwelling unit in addition to your primary dwelling unit on your lot. The city, with the when we were able to obtain a state grant, we actually hired a local designer, and we were able to provide free of charge copies or plans for accessory dwelling units. Those plans are on our website. There are some things you have to do when you come in to pull a permit, but it does reduce any costs without having to go out and get a draftsman or architect to come up with the plan. So right now the city has 3 plans that are available. 2 of them are under 500 square feet, which helps because you don't have to pay school impact fees with those. The third one is a little over 900 square feet. And we have a studio, 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom. Each one has a different elevation type, contemporary, craftsman, and I think Mediterranean. All available online. If you have any questions, you can come in the planning department, speak to us, or a lot of the information resides on the city's website.
Do you have any notion about how many people live in those at this point in Visalia?
Well, I know we issued, and I'm looking at Brandon Smith, who's also in our planning department. I think we issued about 42 permits last year for accessory dwelling units. Prior to that, I want to say about 8 years ago, I think we'd issued about 5. So we are starting to see an increase or an uptick in accessory dwelling unit permits. But like anything, I think what we hear sometimes from people that are looking to pursue this, when you hire a contractor, somebody help you build it, that sometimes gets costly.
Good. Okay, Rudy Mendoza has a question. Right in the front here. Oh, you got it already? Thank you.
Gentlemen, I read sometime this morning that Idaho seems to have the hottest housing market in the nation today in terms of availability and affordability. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question, but getting down to brass tacks, if you had the ability to advise our legislators on a package of policy suggestions, what are 2 or 3 things that need to be done from a policy perspective in order for us to be able to increase that affordability index to where it should be, which I would hope it needs to be at least 10-15% higher?
From a real estate perspective, how many of you have heard of CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act? That is, in my opinion alone, and 800 other people at the state, that is the #1 barrier to affordable housing in California. Some environmental law should be put in place, absolutely, but the stringency with which CEQA operates in California costs everybody a lot of money. And that would be my #1. Number 2, people love to talk about affordable housing, but every few years something else comes out that actually does not make houses more affordable. It's carbon monoxide detectors, and then mandatory sprinkler systems. And I don't know if you ever thought about it, but if your sprinkler system actually does go off, it doesn't ever shut off, and so the whole inside of your house is going to be destroyed by the water. So then you file an insurance claim, and then your insurance company cancels you. That's where we're at right now. And so we're working to, insurance is also another big deal. We have an insurance task force for the state of California. We have some high-powered ex-presidents of CAR. We're talking to legislators. We're talking to insurance companies. We're trying to bring those costs down. So insurance is one. CEQA is a big one. And just, every legislator that brings in something that's more expensive, solar panels, mandatory solar panels that will run 55% of your electricity. That's great to a certain extent, but that adds $20,000 to the cost of the house. So these are things that I think that people just use common sense in our legislature. That would probably help out a lot too.
Are indoor sprinklers mandatory in new construction now?
Yes.
Holy crap, I didn't know that.
Yeah, 10-year maybe.
Is there a labor problem right now in building housing? Because I'm familiar with 3 housing projects, and I only see a couple people working these projects. And I'm thinking, some of them, they started to board up again. And I'm thinking it's got to be labor. And I wonder if that's the problem.
Yeah, our contractors complain about that all the time, getting skilled laborers, but also just laborers, period. It's unmistakable to us that the fear in our immigrant communities is playing a big role in that. People are self-deporting. People are not wanting to be out in public. And I think the number I just saw in an article in recent weeks was in Southern California, over 60% of the roofers were undocumented workers. So they're not showing up to work these days. Guess why? So it's a big problem.
So I wanted to step back over to the question that Rudy asked, and talking about what was mentioned earlier about regulatory relief and how that could absolutely speed up getting the products to market and getting the houses developed, and perhaps doing it at a more cost-effective price point that would create, increase the affordability index and get people into home ownership on a greater number, throughout the state of California. And obviously, the state of California is a big state, very complex, with different sort of incomes all around the state. So that's absolutely one thing. The question about affordable housing really is affordable relative to what? In that, okay, if somebody can't afford a home, there's a couple different ways to fight that battle and to create sort of public policy moving forward. One is bring the cost of the home down, which regulatory relief would absolutely do. The other is help them afford it. And there's been efforts in that regard, but one of the things would be more down payment assistance, more understanding of the fact that, interest rates are going to be where they're going to be. There's not a lot of great control over that, but certainly creating a way for individuals to get to home ownership rather than just reducing the cost of the units is also part of the battle that I think a lot of entities are trying to move progress on.
But I would also say, because I haven't said enough controversial things yet, that in 1979-ish, we changed the way we financed a number of public things in California through Prop 13. And there have been some reasonable ways to change Prop 13, because that mostly falls on homeowners and housing owners and not on businesses the way we do it, because businesses keep just changing their names and never paying the increase in property costs. And that has changed how cities and counties have to finance infrastructure. So in California, when you build a house, you pay anywhere from 30 to 40% of the cost is going to go into local fees. And they're real fees that pay for real impacts on things like sewer and water and roads and police, and everything else. So it's not that they're going to a bad place, but at one time, these things could be paid through a property tax system that was more fair. So I would say that's my big idea, but good luck with that. People wanting to change Prop 13.
Yeah, and as a county employee, I can't leave Prop 13 alone. If someone brings up Prop 13, that's a start of a whole conversation. That is absolutely, Tom is right. Prop 13 changed in many, many ways the whole housing landscape of California, and there's a ton of research and incredible different literature out there that talks about the impacts across the school system, the impacts across roads. A lot of what we experience in sort of our community and the inability to really truly invest really dates back to a lot of the Prop 13 changes. One of the big today changes that we still are realizing with Prop 13 is not unlike the sort of locked-in interest rate that I'm sure there's a lot of folks here who have a great interest rate at 2.5. You're not going to sell your house and go get a 5 or a 6% interest rate. That same thing applies to Prop 13. If you bought your house, let's say in 1988, and you got a great deal on it, your home is only accrued on assessed valuation 2% per year. In California, it has performed much better than that since 1988. So your home is worth considerably more on the market than that. So you're getting basically a discount. You're getting a tax discount because that property is worth considerably more on the market, but you're paying significantly less. If your neighbor sold their house in 2018, they're paying substantially more on taxes. So Prop 13 also has sort of an unequal sort of performance among homeowners, which discourages people from selling over and over, which I know from other work is that the part of the major housing crisis we have is sort of inefficient allocation of units. We have smaller, maybe retirees or people whose families are getting smaller in homes that have 3 and 4 bedrooms because they don't want to sell. They have great interest rates, they have great tax rates, yet we have growing families who have 3 or 4 or 5 people in their family who need a 3 or 4 bedroom house, but it's hard to get those because it's so discouraging to sell those homes once you've got such a great deal. And Prop 13 has been a big part of kind of locking in that lack of movement in California.
I was going to bring this up with a question, but you saved me the time, I guess, John. We had this issue come up in one of our discussions about people who are living in places where their costs, either whether it's their mortgage payments, their property taxes, or whatever, are so low that it discourages them from moving, even though that is not the place where they should be moving, and it's stifling the housing market ultimately.
100%, and that's absolutely California-wide. And for when you talk about first-time home buyers, it makes it hard for that first-time home buyer to get in. But at the same time, everybody here, if you have equity, that's a good thing. That's a good thing for you to have your equity. It's a good thing for your generations coming behind you to have that equity. So it is absolutely a dilemma that there is no clear-cut solution to. And again, as a county employee, our primary 64% of our discretionary revenue that we use for public safety and jails comes from property taxes. So I'm not in any way, shape, or form suggesting any changes to property taxes because it really is essential to us, but it creates a difficulty for affordable housing.
I wanted to get to the issue of young people not being able to buy their first home. What is there a remedy to that? Brian,
Well, I
you're-
think John mentioned more programs for first-time home buyer sort of down payment assistance. That's a big deal, and the fact is we subsidize housing in a major way in this country. So the question is not whether we subsidize housing, the question is who we're subsidizing it for. By far the largest subsidy in the United States is the mortgage interest deduction, which goes to homeowners. We all of us who own a home appreciate the mortgage interest deduction that itemize our taxes. But none of that goes essentially to first-time home buyers, or very little of it does, because they are not people who itemize on their taxes, if they are able to get into a home, and generally they are not seeing that subsidy.
You're absolutely right, and this is something that we are trying to alleviate at the state level. And if you've heard of California Dream for All, it's a Calihafa program for down payment assistance. It was just reapproved this year, and they have, I do not know what the number is, but they started this program a few years ago. It was a huge success. They ran out of money, so they got it back together. We got the money, we have the funding, and so there will be thousands of people who will be able to apply for this loan. It's not really a loan, this grant to help with down payment assistance, which really helps out first-time home buyers. Also, when you go back to the ADU thing, what I've seen is a trend with friends buying houses together, and I've had a few clients that have done that. And it could be you live in this house, you live in this house, and then once we build equity, we can sell that and buy something else, and stay in that one for 3 to 5 years, build equity, and then boom, you can buy your dream home. You have enough equity and enough money to be able to do that. So these are the things that we were tackling at the state level. We realized it's almost impossible for a person making an average income to afford their first house, and the houses that they really need are out of reach because people are not selling them.
I have a question that would segue from that. A lot of young people have student loan debt, and they're trying to pay that off, making it very difficult to buy homes. Now, the first 100 years of the University of California and Cal State University, there was zero tuition. It was 100% state subsidized, the universities. But now, state university tuition is quite high, and University of California. So people are graduating with debt burdens that they never used to have. So it was easier to get into a first home. Are you seeing any of that as a factor?
Student loan debt is a huge factor when you're trying to qualify to buy a home. Now, this is a lender question, not a real estate question for me, but I believe that the rules have changed and the way that lenders are looking at outstanding debt for student loans, they're putting less emphasis on that than they did before. It used to be a killer, a deal killer. You will not get qualified if you have too much student debt. But yeah, they're working through that, and I believe it's less now.
I would just mention medical debt is a bigger
Yep.
barrier.
Can we get the microphone back over that way? Appreciate it, thanks. While we're waiting for that, will homeownership just become unattainable for everybody, or for certain kinds of people, or for, I don't know, young people, or?
I believe that the prices of homes and the amount of money that people are making are going in opposite directions. So I don't see a positive future unless something changes. I don't know what you guys think about that.
So at some point, we're going to reach that point where homeownership will not be affordable in this country.
I would say yes.
I recently heard an economist who runs a think tank economics firm at UCLA speak on this issue, and his position is that there's sort of a tax of living in California, and Prop 13, for example, is 1%. That is one of the most moderate, if not lowest, property tax rates in all of the United States. However, our property values are very, very high relative to most places other than New York and New Jersey. And so living in California is a very expensive proposition. Living in other states is not as expensive. And the reality might be is that folks are moving to places that make sense for their income and their ability to seek employment for their various different skill sets that are consistent with their ability to seek an income. And that may sort of realign on it. And you mentioned sort of across the country, it may sort of nationalize a housing market in a different way that we haven't seen, because there is really a price of living in California. Even here in a very affordable part of California is still expensive for many low-income individuals.
Some sort of legislative change, mitigation has to take place, however. Or California's just going to be screwed. I mean, people won't be able to live here, so they'll move elsewhere. They're already doing that. And then if there's nobody to buy those homes, Brian, what does that do to the property values?
It'll lower it. So in 50 years, you can come back and buy that $1 million house for $400,000.
Paul, I mean, I'm sorry, Reggie.
Yeah, I was just wondering how if short-term rentals play any role in the supply crunch for housing, and if they also play a role in driving up the cost of rent.
I'll go ahead and take that, because the city just actually adopted not too long ago a short-term rental ordinance that at least monitors how many short-term rentals a community has. I know there's a lot of literature out there, and I think in other communities, coastal communities in particular, where they're banning short-term rentals because they're saying, hey, there's not a supply of housing for our workforce, for people who live here that work in our community. In Visalia, I can tell on our last numbers we ran, there's about 300 and in excess of 300 short-term rentals that are legally permitted in the city. I don't even think that equates to less than 1% of our total housing stock in Visalia. So I don't think it's been that drastic issue. It's something that council was somewhat concerned about, but I think it was more a protection of neighborhoods, because some of the things that were occurring with short-term rentals wasn't so much a diminishment on housing stock.
How's the city defining the short-term rental, Paul, as far as
Short-term rentals, the
first
unit
term
that's
or
occupied for less than 30 days.
30 days?
Less than 30 days.
Yeah. Brian, did you have anything to say about that? I saw you kind of shaking your head about it.
Yeah,
That's what we're talking about,
proposed-
Airbnb.
Well, I just wasn't in favor of Visalia putting the TOT on my Airbnbs. Now I pay for every $200 I rent out. I got to pay the city $20 for not doing anything. But that's just my opinion. That's just my personal opinion, not my professional opinion. I do not think that in the city of Visalia, I think we've had one complaint since Airbnbs were licensed and they put in the program. Other cities, The coastal cities, you go to the beach, I guarantee you I would not want Airbnb by me because I know the kids are going out there having a good time, making way too much noise. So, but yeah, but I agree with you that I don't think it has affected the supply of housing. I think that is not even close to the answer there. Because people need short-term, I mean, they need hotels. It's the same thing as a hotel.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Are we having an issue with LA or big city investors coming in and buying houses here?
Hold that microphone up, ma'am, a little bit so we can hear
Are we
you.
having an issue with LA investors or investment firms coming in and buying up houses in this city?
The answer is yes. Over the last 5 years, sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, depending on the cost of financing. You know, a lot of them are cash buyers, and they have come in and they've bought a lot of stuff. But then you'll see an ebb and flow of investor money coming into the valley. But definitely, and I had in 2018, I had a speech in front of the realtors, and I said, either we need to own Tulare County or somebody else is going to, because we're the next big thing in real estate. And so we've seen what has happened. We have people from the north, people from the south coming in and buying up a lot of properties.
Yeah.
Turn
Let's,
them into rentals.
you turn them into rentals? Yeah. Any questions right now? Okay.
Right in the middle.
Oh.
Yeah, quick question. How many of homes in Visalia are rentals and how many are owners or are owned by chance? Percentage?
No.
Any way to know?
I don't know. No idea.
The census has those numbers. You can actually see them on the U.S. Census.
I want to say it's more than 50%.
Yeah, I think it's about 50-50 in Visalia, yeah.
50% of our population is renting their home. But that's kind of a guess, really, right? Sounds like a good guess, but are there any new models for housing on the horizon? Kinds of ways that we do housing other than the traditional. What we're talking about is we have apartments, we have apartment complexes, and we have housing planned developments, et cetera. Is there anything different from those that we can look forward to?
Sure. And so, thank you for sending that question in advance. I was able to do a little research on that because I work with an organization that does advising for finance officers, government finance officers across the country, and I moderated a panel last summer in DC about affordable housing, and there were several panelists that I wanted to share sort of the model that they're using. The first one, and I think the most exciting one, is called the Housing Opportunities Commission of Montgomery County, Maryland. And they've been in existence for decades, and they're sort of a vertically integrated version of what Self-Help and Housing Authority do, but they're all together. And they have an endowment of over $50 million plus $3 million annually committed from their local government, the county in their case, and they use that to go and vest projects, go buy them, get the tax credits, build it, develop it, lease it up, as well as market rented units, and they use the profit from the market rents to offer the subsidies on the below market interest rate projects. And this is a revolving fund, so they've kind of created an entirely closed looped financing system that allows for not only the purchase all of these sort of like hard assets, the initial investment of the project, as well as the ongoing operational expenses of the project in sort of a closed looped way that they don't really need other than $3 million a year of investment to keep this going. And they've got 20,000 units or something. They've got thousands of units that they own and operate themselves.
Is that a public enterprise, a public-private enterprise?
It's a quasi-governmental agency that is a PHA plus a nonprofit housing developer. It's got multiple designations.
Oh, that's cool. Montgomery County, Maryland, by the way, though, is a very prosperous community.
It is. So it is not Tulare County by any means, but it is somebody that they are, and for example, Atlanta, and not necessarily a prosperous
parts are
part of the state there is they're doing that as well, and they're taking from a regulatory relief standpoint, they are fast tracking projects that are partnering with their version. They call it Atlanta Urban Development Corporation. So they're not only taking that Housing Opportunities Commission and then taking further sort of municipal relief onto it to even try to accelerate it even more.
I would mention two things. The first is we are operating our first ever community land trust. It's actually in Bakersfield. That is a way to take the land and speculation about land and increased value over time out of the equation of the housing, so you can restrict the owner owns the house, but they don't own the land that's owned by the trust. And so that's controlled so you can keep longer term affordability through this kind of a mechanism. I was not a fan of community land trusts when I first heard about them 20 or 30 years ago. I didn't think we needed them in this area because we didn't have valuations of housing that were increasing as rapidly as they have. So that's one tool. Another thing, there's a lot of conversations about manufactured homes. Manufactured homes are supposed to be easier to build. They're factory-built homes. They're easier. If you think of a car, you know, you can do exacting specifications in a controlled labor environment. I will say we've done some experimentation now, including at the Salt and Light project in Goshen with manufactured units. We've also replaced a couple hundred manufactured homes in various rural communities around the state. And we haven't found it to be the silver bullet that people think it is. However, there are some important efforts right now, including at the federal level, that may be a game changer because it would change the way a chassis, a unit with a chassis on it is considered. And right now, one of the problems with manufactured homes for home ownership is that you can't get them insured as like you do a home. They're considered chattel and not property, and that creates a real barrier for financing to get mortgages.
I would think,
and
yeah.
So if that can be fixed, there may be some interesting way forward for some manufactured housing.
And that brings down the cost of the housing, of course.
It can.
Okay, not of course.
Again, we haven't found that necessarily to be the case because once you put it on a fixed foundation, and then the city wants you to do covered parking, so you got to stick build that, and you know, you still got a lot of the costs of the infrastructure to get to it. We just haven't found it to be the answer that we had hoped. And there's not a lot of local production of these units too, and transportation of the units after they're built at a factory is also a big issue.
The Salt and Light project in West Visalia is pretty amazing. I went to their event 6 months ago. Two things: tiny houses, if we can get them insured, permanent foundations, 700, 500, 700 square feet. Because from my perspective, I'm looking about how do people create generational wealth, and real property is, by and large, the best way to do it, unless you're a really good stock market person. So if we can get people into small houses, and that's where they start, right out of college or right out of high school or right out of trade school, and they can build some wealth, and then they can move on from there, I think that's a great idea. The insurance part of it, that's what I'm not really sure, because insurance is pretty crazy right now. But that's one idea. Also, in bigger cities, urban areas, you will see that will turn commercial buildings into houses. I'd rather see them into houses rather than into apartments, so that people can actually buy them and own them rather than rent them. From my perspective, I've seen that work in bigger cities. We don't have a lot of empty 10-story warehouses in Visalia. In fact, we have 0. But that would be another idea. Start small, help build wealth, and then go from there.
And from the city's standpoint, I think, again, procedurally, what are the things the city can do to help maybe streamline some of these processes, some of the development standards that we apply? Things that we've talked about with council and our commission include concepts such as missing middle, and I think that's maybe something that might have been looked at here.
Yep,
but it's going back to a way of looking at housing than what we're traditionally seeing today, which tend to be your traditional single-family home on a single-family lot, or multifamily development, large multifamily development. So it's looking at cottage home type developments. So it's trying to maximize placing more units in a smaller area that share in common ownership or open space areas townhome developments. So for cities, from the city's perspective, it's how do you reincorporate that type of design into what has been traditionally single-family neighborhoods where you have one house per lot and that's it. So again, looking at opportunities where maybe this concept with regards to how housing is provided with more units, maybe smaller in a defined geographical area, and making sure those fit well and integrate well into our existing neighborhoods. So we're still talking about it. We're still trying to grasp, what impacts could that create if you put a large number of units in a traditionally lower development or lower density neighborhood. But council has given staff some direction on further research for something to consider going forward, which is another opportunity to provide a different type of housing product.
Bottom line is the city's exploring something.
We are, yes.
What about 3D printed houses? For a while there, we were hearing about those. Has anything like that been built here in Visalia?
Nothing like that has been built in Visalia. I think the building code requirements and the regulatory framework, those are things that we would want to ensure life safety is protected when you build something like that. I know in the city of Tulare, somebody used, I'm going to call them C-train containers to add on to the add a second story using that type of that type of design criteria for their home. But it really hasn't translated to seeing that type of development occur here in Visalia.
What would happen in August on a 3D printed home? That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Sitting out here in Visalia.
People are trying all kinds of things, though. I mean, the sea trade, converting shipping boxes into housing is an example.
Yeah, a question regarding, I do a lot of walking around town, and I see a lot of single family, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like there's a lot of single family homes and multifamily. There's a lot of empty lots I know are higher density supposedly, but they never get built. And is that a continuing problem? It just seems like it's always there. And I've been in the development business for years, and it seems like it's always been that way. And it's a never-ending battle in terms of all the single-family owners don't want the multifamily after they're moved in, but they never get built.
Yeah, you're not wrong, by the way. There's somebody else I know who's here that's said the same thing in their walks around town. In fact, he's on our planning team.
Yeah, those idiots. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, I would say one of the biggest changes I've seen during my career, and if you're just talking about Visalia, for many years, I would make the comment that the city restricted multifamily development pretty significantly, including requiring a special use permit for anything over, at one time it was as low as 20 units. Talk about discouraging multifamily development. I will say that has changed dramatically. Working with the city now, and also combined with some significant state law and changes in state law, that essentially, if you have zoning, you get to build it by right. So as much as I love to meet neighbors and discuss the future with them, I don't necessarily have to have arguments with them anymore, nor does the city council, who are beholden to their voters, and you're absolutely right. Once a single family subdivision goes in, that vacant lot is going to be very controversial, and regardless of whether it's low income, deed restricted, or whether it's market rate, people do not want to see higher density housing in their neighborhood. And there's study after study after study that shows that it doesn't diminish property values and all those things, but it doesn't matter because a lot of people just don't want to hear facts.
So to carry on to that, the state is really, because of what you've heard, where you have neighbors that have lived there, and now their lives are going to change because they now have a new development that's a lot different than what they live in a traditional single-family neighborhood. That's where the state has now intervened and said, okay, cities, if you plan for the housing and you zone for it, and it checks all the boxes per your standards, you can't say no. I mean, you're going to lose in a legal challenge, but as long as they show the compliance with everything you've outlined, you have to say yes. So there are times, and we've been in a couple of those meetings where, yeah, we have a large neighborhood that just does not want to see multifamily development, regardless of market rate or designated affordable. They don't want to see it. It's changing what they're accustomed to. Visalia, and Tom is right, Visalia has changed. Right now, if you were to build 80 units or less in multifamily, it's by right. It would go from a review of city staff on the building permit. And there's nothing anyone could say. Again, as long as it meets all the standards, we have to allow them to proceed forward. With the housing element that was recently adopted, the state says, cities, you need to figure out ways to reduce barriers to housing. So how can you facilitate more housing? One of the tasks we'll be looking at this year is increasing that number from 80 to potentially 200. So it's things, again, if your city is planned for it, it's designated, you're in a housing crisis, then you should be approving these things with minimal interruption.
Is the city of Visalia meeting its requirements as ordered by the state of California for?
We follow all the rules that the state issues.
Very well said, Counselor. The questions right now? Ah, come on.
So, this was a while ago that I heard this law, that if you buy a house and it's on a lot, California made a law that you could put 2 houses on that lot. And this city of Visalia could not say no. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's SB 9.
Yeah, okay.
And you can actually do more than 2.
Right, so you do 2 houses, and then each of those houses can have an ADU.
Yes.
So you're talking about if I went out and bought a lot, I could build 4 homes.
If you went out and bought a lot and you did a SB 9 lot split with an SB 9 development, you
Yeah.
can have 4.
And the
dwelling
city of
units.
Visalia would have to
We
approve it.
would have to, and we have, yes.
And why aren't we seeing that everywhere? Why doesn't somebody tear down some dump on Green Acres Drive, build 2 homes? I mean, that would make so much money. I know a dump right now that needs to be bulldozed.
Well, I would just say that we're working with a number of cities on their ADU programs, and we're providing some financing. It has, again, not proved to be the silver bullet because it's not inexpensive. Even these smaller units at 500 square feet, if it's a standalone unit, we're seeing costs as high as like $165,000 just to build that. Just to build that.
You have to front the finance.
If you have somebody who's going to pay you $300,000.
Yeah. It's like buying a Maserati and putting it on your backyard. You know, it's just not simple. It's not as simple as all that.
It's the $400,000 it takes to build it, or the $200,000 it takes to build it. That people don't have access to that kind of borrowing and buying the property and owning their home and making mortgages and then floating that. And building is not simple either in California. Building codes are, so your average homeowner, your average person that has 1 lot going and building 2 single-family dwelling units, even if they're small and modest, is not necessarily something everybody's sort of equipped to do. It's a complicated process in California.
There are provisions in the state law that kind of say, hey, if you're going to do that, you got to reside there for 3 years. You can't demo. If there's a house there, you're not supposed to be demoing the house. So there's some things to make sure that at the end of the day, if you're doing this, it's just not for, I'm gonna put 4 units there and make a big investment, not live there, not have any, stake in the game of residing in one of those units. So
It's going to be responsible. Not like your plan, but yeah. Yeah. Tom, Self-Help Enterprises was involved with the project of the lofts at Fort Visalia, right? I know it's only been a couple of years that it's been there, but could you kind of update us on how that project is going? It's kind of a unique project for downtown Visalia anyway, and we have some interest.
It's going well. It's an 80-unit project that half of the units, 40 of the units, are actually reserved for people who have come out of homelessness. So it is a very challenging project to operate, and we have gone through some tenants that weren't ready for independent living, which is not unusual in projects that have that kind of clientele, certainly at that level. But I would say that we've worked closely with our partner, the city, with the police department, and we are actively managing, and they are actively case managed by Tulare County Behavioral Health. Those permanent supportive housing units is how we refer to them. We have a great on-site services provider, the Arts Consortium, that has some great programs at the Peter N. Carey Gallery, who's in our midst. So I would say it's been a tremendous success. We don't have parking problems. We don't have major ongoing concerns, and it is full, and we expect it to be full because it has a waiting list as well.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Others? No. I'm going to ask you each to sort of. You got a question? Or someone's calling. Someone's calling.
Not my phone. Brandon, you don't get to ask questions.
You addressed the lofts at Fort Visalia, and then just challenge and that has taken on some formerly homeless persons. Can someone speak to some of what's called the home key facilities? Those are hotels that have been converted over to taking in some homelessness issues. And how is that going? How is that? And have we seen can we talk about some success and some challenges with that?
So as a county employee, I am not directly involved in those. The housing authority, we were involved in one home key project early on. I think it's called Madsen Gardens now. What used to be Tegas Ranch back in the day. That whole complex. And we offloaded it. We sold it to one of the main entities that's in that business, RH Builders, and they do a lot of these throughout. So I'll say from a county perspective, not speaking on behalf of HHSA, they have done a fantastic job, and it has done amazing things in addressing one of the key parts of the affordable housing sort of universe is the homeless population, and ensuring that there is sort of a safety net for those individuals who likely may have been priced out of housing or had difficulties acquiring housing because of landlords requiring 3 times the amount of the rent for their income before they can qualify. Those are people that are also on the spectrum of affordable housing as well, notwithstanding behavioral health concerns for that population as well. Those are very complicated projects to finance. They're complicated projects to run. I will say the performance of them, I think, has beat most people's expectations. They're usually safe. They're usually well managed. People usually want to be there. Tom mentions there are some folks who have a hard time, complying with the new rules, because there are rules and there are monitoring and there are security guards on site, and so some lifestyles have to change. And if people are ready to make those changes, then good for them. We've got houses for them and services ready to go. What is going to be a real concern, and we don't know where this is going to go because it truly hasn't been written yet, is Tom mentioned sort of the HR1, the federal legislation from last year. That's going to roll back a lot of the public subsidies to Medi-Cal, to CalWorks, to CalFresh, and it's likely that the state of California, which has been spending billions of dollars in the last couple of years for Home Key Plus, veteran supportive housing, and all of just the whole permanent supportive housing infrastructure, is likely going to have to move money from those columns into backfilling Medi-Cal, CalWorks, and CalFresh. And so there's only so much money to go around, and if we're looking at sort of a public policy standpoint, all of these safety net programs come from the state, and there has to be a prioritization, and it's quite likely that these new home key projects, and I say new because in the scheme of Medicare and Medicaid, they're newer, certainly newer than that, they're probably going to suffer. And what that means for the operators and the tenants absolutely remains to be seen. And there's no way to know where that's going to go, but it's probably not going to be good across the board.
It's subsidized housing then, I guess, right?
It is fully subsidized housing. These are folks that don't pay any rent to be there. It is subsidized across the board,
Well, it's
and that was
subsidized, all right.
by design. That was by design.
Wow. I know.
If I may, we have an election coming up in November. Are there any relevant propositions that any of you are aware of that we can start thinking about?
I was going to say the housing bond. It does not have a number yet. It's gotten through committees at both the Assembly and the Senate. It's got to get signed off by the governor, but the housing bond is going to be critical, and we're going to be supporting that.
And that's $10 billion is what is proposed right now when it came out of the Senate committee, and so that'd be fantastic. That would be great if it could go along.
Was that one of the governor's 3 priorities, and it's finally coming to a ballot? Is that right?
Yeah, it got put on the back burner last year to the unhappiness of many of us, and but yes, it was one of the governors. He's expressed support.
If such a thing is put on the ballot, I certainly hope it would get passed, but I'm going to be a cynic here. How much of that money is going to get to Visalia and Tulare County?
Well, we're still, we've probably brought in at least a couple $100 million since the last bond.
The last one?
Just with the last bond, and that's not just us, that's others, other developers, but certainly Tulare County's seen probably close to $500 million, I would think.
Well, that's pretty, okay. I'm not going to complain about that. Sounds like our share.
We want more still. We still want more. Right?
Well, of course, everybody wants more. Yeah. Right behind you.
What's going on with mobile homes right now in terms of being low-cost housing or affordable housing for people? I've read that the rents are going up and...
I'll speak from, people proposing to develop new mobile home parks. We haven't really, we've had inquiries, people reaching out to see, what's the process, what does that look like? It's a form of housing, so the city, as long as it meets all of the parameters in our ordinance, that's just another type of housing that can be provided. But those have just been inquiries. We've never seen anything come through our site plan review process showing how they would intend to develop a piece of property with the mobile home park. Just haven't really seen it.
I'm going to ask you each to look into the future just a bit and tell us what you think the housing profile for Visalia and maybe Tulare County will look like in 5-10 years.
I am an optimist. I definitely think that it's, as I think you mentioned early on, it's an essential need everybody has, and it's something that there are good working entities out there trying to deliver. It may not look the same, and I don't think it's going to look the same for generations into the future that it has for prior generations. California is a very dynamic state, and California is a very attractive state, and a lot of people want to live here, and it's going to be that way for a long time, in my opinion. I love California, and I think that that's going to continue to draw people here. We also are a massively powerful economy, and that really doesn't seem to be slowing down relative to the rest of the United States economy. And so I don't think that doomsday is necessarily on the horizon, but we absolutely could see some major difficulties facing younger people getting into homes if we don't have real surplus, more generation of more units that allow for people to achieve home ownership in the next 5 to 10 years. So I'm an optimist, but work definitely needs to be done.
Well, it's going to sort of ask you also what do you most fear, but it sounds like that's it. That
I would fear the fact that young people are going to have a very difficult time. Miley mentioned the student loans. It's going to be very hard for young people to achieve home ownership, I think harder than it was perhaps previously.
Boy. As someone with 4 children, one of them owns a home though, so that's okay. That's not good news. Okay, Tom?
Yeah, I'm really proud of being part of the effort over the last, I'd say, 7 to 8 years to put a real dent in serving the homeless population that was growing pretty dramatically. We haven't gotten the new figures from this year's point in time count yet, but there have been significant efforts. We've been part of it, others have. The Navigation Center, that getting done was really a big deal. The Salt and Light project, our project in downtown, we have a transitional project. So I am optimistic because the city is good to work with. They have a deeper understanding of some of the challenges than they perhaps did at other times in our history. But I'm optimistic because everybody feels the housing problem. People who have kids who are staying home a little bit longer than you expected, people like me, you know, they know somebody who's experienced some problem in their life that has made them housing unstable, or they have people in their family who want to buy a home and just can't ever seem quite to get there to the point where they're mortgage ready and can afford a home. But we also have a number of rental units, bigger, you know, cachet of rental units that are coming online in this city. So we have much better diversity of opportunity for housing. So that gives me some optimism.
My hope would be that we continue to foster innovative ways of providing other types of housing. I think we tend to see a lot of the traditional things because sometimes that's really easy to sell. People are accustomed to it, people expect it, and that's what developers are used to just providing. I think our role as working for the city is to give our decision makers enough information to identify there are opportunities to provide maybe smaller housing, a little bit more dense in areas that have traditionally been lower density. I think one thing, looking into that crystal ball, I think the city's gonna have, is really gonna have to start asking itself, what do we want to look like? Because as we talk about housing and we talk about growth, the city is coming up kind of on the horizon of its current general plan.
Yeah.
So the city's already starting to contemplate looking at developing a new general plan to accommodate the growth we anticipate occurring in this area. But what does that look like? I can tell you when we've had developments such as the one at Goshen or Demery in Houston, and the one that hasn't been built at Ben Maddox and Kay, there was opposition to how dare the city support something like this. But I think with costs, land costs, concerns with preserving agricultural land, you know, what's the alternative? It's building up, building high, maybe more dense. Then you have the sentiment of, well, we don't want to look like a big urban city. We don't want to be like the Bay Area. So I'm optimistic in that I think the city will learn and provide opportunities for other types of housing. I just think it's going to be somewhat of a struggle to get there sometimes because I think there's a perception of what we all believe is true, even though things are changing.
Well, I don't mean to put you on the spot here or anything, Paul, because you got a nice name. But, you know, the city has been working under its general plan, a version of it, for decades, for a very long time, and it's served the city very well. Are you saying that the city of Visalia has to adjust its vision a little bit or do things differently or what?
Well, typically you have a general plan that covers about a 20 to 30 year horizon of how growth should occur.
Yeah, and we've reached that, huh?
We adopted it when we started. You know, it's referred to as a 2010, and horizon is 2030. So we're getting close. Very expensive process to do. The environmental side of it gets very contentious, gets litigated, but that's going to set the foundation for where we grow in the next 20 years. So those are things that, you know, as you look at when a city grows, you have to accommodate emergency services, so it's more police, more fire, infrastructure, which no one talks about because it's all under the ground. No one pays attention to how much it costs to put that pipe, water, all the things that, you know, the city's gonna have to grapple with as we look to grow, to accommodate housing and jobs and everything else that comes with a growing city. So I think Visalia is more than capable to do it. I think we're positioned well, but I think there's gonna be somewhat of a shift on how that may look into the future.
Okay, great, thanks. Finally, Brian?
First thing I'd like to say is never wait for the state to come help you. If we want to do something productive, we need to do it ourselves. And really, that's the bottom line with me. I've thought this for a long time. I think Visalia is doing a really good job with how we're growing, and I think we're well positioned for the next 20 years to continue that growth. Our unique position in the state of California, where we are near major thoroughfares and we attracted business basically because of the economy of this area, I think that'll help us out for the next 2 decades. And California in general will survive in spite of itself. It always has, and I don't like to see industry leave the state of California because that's tax dollars that we desperately need. Hopefully somebody figures that out in the legislature and we do a better job of making California a more friendly environment for businesses to invest in. But as far as Visalia goes, Tulare County goes, I think we're the best position in all of the state of California, and I think we have a bright future.
With that, I want to thank you all very much for joining us this evening. John Hess, Tom Collishaw, Paul Bernal, and especially Brian Gilbert. Give them all a nice round of applause, would you? I'd just like to add, we've been doing these forums for what, 16 years, 17 years maybe? And, Yeah, yes we have. And I don't think I can't remember one that was full of more thoughtful, important, reasoned information than our forum tonight. I thought it was fantastic. Let us hope they are all that way. Paul Bernal mentioned in preparing for the future, we got to figure out how to train workers for our community. Well, you weren't the first one to think of that, Paul, okay? Because that's what we are going to talk about at our next forum next month on March 10th, training the new generation of workers for Visalia. And we hope you can join us for that. Before I let you go, I just want to introduce and thank the members of our planning team, Catherine Doe, who's right here, Miley Melkonian, who's right there in the front row, Bill Osak, who always leaves early to beat the traffic, Lou Griswold, who is his usual unassuming self over there, and way in the back, talk about unassuming, Donna Kinshu. Thank you, team, very much. And with that, I hope we'll see you next month, but I bid you good night. Enjoy the farm show.